Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts, so say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read, bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further? All right. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Welcome, بالأحضان. This is an amazing day. Just less than 24 hours after the verdict of police officer Derek Chauvin of the murder of George Floyd. We've been living this for almost a year now, and that captured the imagination of Minnesotans and people all over America and all over the world. The world was watching this and see if really our justice system was under trial, really. And the verdict, guilty in 3 accounts, which is really amazing. This is a rarity that a white police officer will be convicted of killing a black man. This is rarity in Minnesota, probably the first time, and a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, a lot of elation as why it's so hard to prosecute police officers, law enforcement, when they kill citizens, civilians, when they use aggressive forces, when they use excessive force that cause death to citizens unnecessarily and present dangerous to the community. Police are there to serve and to help us, not to kill us. We're gonna talk to Peter Thomson. He's everybody know, we had him on the show before. And welcome to the show, Peter, and thank you so much for coming and taking your time in such terrible time that we're living in pandemic, and we've been living this trial for months now, since last year. So, but tell us a little bit, why is it so hard to convict or prosecute a police officer from the legal perspective?
Well, much of what you say is true, and I'm glad to spend some time with you. It's very multifaceted issue, complex issue, so maybe we can just take one piece at a time. To address that first question, it's difficult because the public conception of police officers is is widely disparate. In other words, you know, people who have a skin color like mine generally have had positive experiences with police officers. Before I was a defense attorney, I was a federal prosecutor, and the police officers, the federal agents, all of those people were always my witnesses. And I came to, you know, respect a great number of them doing a very difficult job and a dangerous job and doing it well. The perspective of other people, particularly Black and brown people in our society, oftentimes it was just the opposite, you know, because they would be subjected to, you know, improper stops, to kind of disparate treatment by the system. And so they have and had, you know, such a different perspective. So when the police officer is charged with a crime, first of all, a lot of the criminal acts or improper acts would never be brought to anyone's attention because the people in internal affairs or the county attorney's office would have more the perspective, the initial perspective I talked about, the white perspective, so to speak. And also when they would get charged, oftentimes the juries, which are made up traditionally of voter rolls, would be strongly white. And so there'd be a lot of kind of presumptions as to the validity of the work, this tough work they were doing. And so that would make it, you know, that much harder for a prosecutor ever to get a conviction. And as a result, then the people in the police officers who were doing improper things, which is probably 10%, and 90% of the police are doing good work, then, and they wouldn't be prosecuted or they would get acquitted, then that would lead to an idea of that this conduct, you could get away with it. And sort of the macho idea that many people saw on the face of Derek Chauvin when he was having his knee on George Floyd would tend to become institutionalized in the police departments.
Peter, I know the argument of this guy, Derek Chauvin, it was just one of those bad apple. I think this argument has been overused and it doesn't really fly anymore. This is the whole box of apple is rotten. For one reason, when you look at the Supreme Court, when you look at our laws, it protects the use of excessive force. It makes it difficult to prosecute a police officer, a law enforcement. So it is been protected by our existing law. I understand the racism and the jury selection and the culture. We can work on that. It's going to take for some time to change that. But our legal system and our law, as it's written, protect abuse by law enforcement. We cannot count on just the goodwill of a few. That's the other way around. A few good apples.
You're right. And really, it goes much deeper than that. It goes way back to the founding of our country. You know, where people with brown skin were only counted as 3/5 human. And so a lot of these problems, there are problems with excessive force use in law. The law should be changed. However, our whole society needs to change in addition. Not that that's an excuse to wait to change the law. The law should be changed. This is a wonderful opportunity for some of these changes to happen in the law, because our society now is really shifting.
That's
Let
right.
me just tell you a little tiny story. My older brother is a really big football fan. He was really disgusted with the football players taking a knee because he didn't want it to disrupt football. Then the coach of the Minnesota Gophers came out strongly in favor of, taking a knee and calling attention to this problem in our society. And all of a sudden, my brother's attitude completely changed about taking a knee. So many different ways society, if there are fundamental changes in society, which is a long journey, this isn't going to happen immediately, but the Derek Chauvin trial, the fact that other police came to testify for the prosecution, the fact that, he was arrested at the outcome at the beginning, like a citizen would be rather than not arrested, the fact that he was remanded into custody yesterday, the fact that there was a verdict, even a fast verdict, those are all signs that these kind of changes have been reflective of a shifting societal view.
When we look at this guy, been found guilty of 3 accounts, and they use this legal term, but when you look at the specific, reckless and dangerous and excessive force and the proceeding for those verdicts is still leaving room to subjective judgment. Why do we need the dream team that works for hours and months to convict somebody that we all know he beheaded George Floyd? We all saw it. 9 minutes. Why do we need that? Which is obvious to most people.
Because we've set up a process whereby, and the process worked in this case. And sometimes when there's an acquittal of a police officer, the process may also have worked. And even though one side or another might be furious about it. And obviously, the people of color side, has been disregarded and damaged far too often in history. But the fact that it worked on this occasion and needs to go through this process, and the process worked, and the process needs to continually be improved. But the fact that it worked is very hopeful. And there's another thing, there are more cases coming up. 3 other cases in the Floyd case, and then a case coming up after that in the Dante Wright killing. So some of these verdicts could come out the other way because the facts are much different. Like you say, on the Chauvin case, it was so obvious by just looking at the video. But some of these other ones could come out the other way. And in some of them, if they come out the other way, the process may also be working, which makes my point is this is only one venue, and it's not a very good venue to really measure how society is doing in terms of our caste system. I say caste system because I just read this book by Isabel Wilkerson, which, I think it is racism is part of the caste system, but it's a much more adequate way to explain it. And in terms of all of the different terms in the charges, where they get definition is 2 places. First of all, they get definition in all of the jury instructions, which you may or may not have heard. where the judge defines what the law is in terms of those. And to the extent that those instructions are not terribly objective or crystal clear, then the definition comes in determining whether the facts meet, the dangerousness or the recklessness. It comes from the 12 tried and true, the juries, which is a representative of what society thinks about these things, which kind of brings us back to the jury trial. And so that's all the jurors can do is look at the facts, apply the law as they get them if they're doing their job. And then these broader issues and the other venues where these things need to be addressed are, fairness and equity and equality in healthcare, and in education, and in vocational opportunity. And those things are way more important than how long Derek Chauvin is going to be locked away in prison, because those things are really going to have an impact on society broadly. And those are the things that make this a continuing journey, and that people need to keep their sleeves rolled up and where they can in their lives work on accomplishing those ends.
I've always interested in seeing the relationship between how the law is developed and our culture. And historically, usually the laws are more progressive than the mainstream culture itself. And the law usually try to pick up societal and societal vices and illness and control it and try to limit those illness in our society, like racism and inequality and racial justice and all of that. And it seems like our laws is the other way around. Like the culture is now is dragging the law with it, not the other way around. Am I reading this correctly, or just being pessimistic here?
I think your last statement is the most accurate. That is, culture leads the way, because the way the law is set up, it's set up in this system we call stare decisis and past precedents. And so the next case always has to have that look back to keep some stability in the growth of the law. So the growth of the law usually, I think, drags behind, and it is guilty in protecting the status quo. In other words, we have had a lot of chaos here, and lots of times out of chaos, change comes, and this could be good change. But let me give you two examples. When people just rely on the law for the change, it doesn't necessarily work. Brown versus Board of Education happened in 1954. We're now in 2021, and educational opportunity is not there yet, even though the law said it should be.
I see.
Then the next huge issue was abortion. And it came up, and both sides thought, if we can win the fight in the Supreme Court, then we're going to win, whether or not you're pro-life or pro-choice. And so that case came up in 1970 something. Justice Blackmun wrote the opinion, and we're no further ahead in resolving that than we ever were, because society is really completely fractured on the issue. And I don't think the law can be relied on really to make a big difference until society is really ready to do it. And the good part about dismantling the caste system in our country that has existed for 300 years is that society seems now to be moving forward in lots of little ways. I mean, on Golf Channel last week, it kind of happened. You and I both like to golf. In the public debate, it's happening. Every time someone, and we all are part of this caste system and all have this systemic racism that's just been branded into us. Not as painfully as it's been branded into the people of color, but nevertheless, it's in our bones, in our assumptions. And so it's just going to take a constant rooting out and listening and dialogue and, battling to rid ourselves of this.
You know, we've been telling black, as far as the verdict itself, what, it's going to go to the sentence, and what's your prediction? People say from 12 to 40 years. How do you come up with those numbers?
Well, let me answer that part first and then go back to where we go from here. The sentence is governed by the guidelines in the statute, and they'll just be sentenced on the most serious of the offenses because they're all kind of intertwined as the same act. And there's a statutory maximum of 40 for second-degree murder. And the way sentences are devised now is through the sentencing guidelines. And the most he can get in the sentencing guidelines, just as they stand, is about 15 years if he got the top end of the guideline. And then the judge, if there are aggravating circumstances, and that's what the judge was talking about yesterday when you were going to have Blakely hearings about this, that's a case, about all these kinds of circumstances. The most the judges really can do is double the outcome of the guidelines under the case law. And so if Judge Cahill, who's done a phenomenal job in this case, very difficult situation, decides he wants to double it, then the sentence would probably be in the air, about 25 years.
There is an appeal, of course. So what's the chances for the appeal? We're going to go back to where we go from here.
Yeah, I want to go back from where here outside of this case for one statement, but yeah, the appeal always happens in serious cases, and the trial was difficult, not because of anything the judge did, but because of a couple of outside things. The $27 million payment, right during the time of trial, Maxine Wilder's statements. There are several things that happened right during the trial that, there was so much publicity that are problematic. But as far as the facts and the law and the way the case was conducted, it's really a clean trial. You're entitled to a fair trial, not a perfect one. So I would think that, the appeal would not be successful. And I just want to say, I think where we go from here, the best thing that could happen right on the horizon would be that the protests continue and we have more and more people protest and we have less and less police intervention and we have no violence in those protests, because that just turns off a lot of people and hurts momentum for the whole movement. And the best thing that could happen now for the movement is H.R. 1 in federal Congress that's pending now to make the election process open and equitable and fair and widespread and non-discriminatory. We should all work to have that law passed so that all of us have an equal voice in our democracy. I think that would be the best single thing on the horizon that we could work toward.
But how about the George Floyd Act? I mean, there is a law there about making it easier to prosecute police officers. What's the chances of that to pass?
Well, it's probably got a good chance right now, given the momentum. I haven't read the act and I don't know about all the different proposals for changing the law for, making prosecutions more fair for the police. More fair to be able to prosecute police. I'm certainly in favor of that. At the same time, I want a good, active, well-intentioned, non-discriminatory police force. And so the balance of those things and how all that comes out in the different words that are used in different statutes, I think should be done carefully.
When you look at the police, but you've done a lot of pro bono work, and could you shed some light there because the defense team were volunteers. Can you shed some light on how that works? Why somebody makes tons of money, go volunteer time to defend a case that I don't know they believe in, or is a public relation, or they really actually genuine believe in the cause?
Well, there are a lot of lawyers who do pro bono work for various causes. I did a lot of work for civil disobedient people, so that the First Amendment is a very important thing in my view. These lawyers all did get paid at a somewhat reduced rate from their usual because they're on a list of lawyers who are willing to represent police officers who are charged. And I respect them for that work. I know Eric Nelson had an incredibly difficult situation personally and professionally because, like you say, we all saw the video right at the outcome, which really was ultimately determinative. And so, he had a very difficult professional burden. And it's important that everyone charged with serious crime, regardless of their status, has good representation. So we ensure that the process does work.
What do your students think of all of this? It's been a year now.
Yeah, I had a final class yesterday at the University of Minnesota Law School, and the class started at 4:00 and the verdict was going to be announced at 4:00. And the students were so interested and so engaged, emotionally and intellectually that we just canceled the class until next week.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us, Peter, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. And you give me hope too, Ahmed. Thank you for